Hello, everybody. We're so fortunate. We've got Susie Kocher, who is one of our advisors for the Central Sierra. And Susie is going to be talking about hardening your house to wildfire. Do I have that right, Susie?
Yes.
Okay, and I think I've shared it so that it's with multiple screens. I don't know if you want me
No,
to.
it told me I was disabled from
Oh, you were disabled. Okay.
the host.
Okay, let me stop share. And then, sorry about that. Okay, now you should be able to.
Great. Yeah, there you guys are. And Betty, it's nice to see you again.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Well, so my name's Susie Kocher. I'm a forestry and natural resources advisor here in the Central Sierra Nevada, which means I cover El Dorado, Amador, and Calaveras and Tuolumne County. Mostly I've been working recently on forest management issues. I have a new workshop series that some of you may have heard of on forest stewardship planning. We have a contract with CAL FIRE, and in 2020 we held 8 workshops. We're in the middle of 2 workshops right now. We're doing a Zoom mostly with in-person field day, like I heard you guys talking about from probably your future meetings as well. And so that's going really well. We've had about 200 people go through it all around the state. We've been trying to help them understand how to move forward on managing their own private forest land. And most people are very concerned about wildfire hazard. The other thing I've been in the middle of is doing prescribed fire education. I have another CAL FIRE grant this time, and I've been hosting workshops up and down the Sierra on prescribed fire, where we talk about the use of prescribed fire, and we get people experience to do it. So last week I was at Blodgett Research Forest in El Dorado County, and we were able to burn, let's see, what day was that? Tuesday, I think, with participants in the workshop series. We had one in Placer County last month as well. So those are the things I'm working on as far as reducing fire hazard. I also had the opportunity to work on this Wildfire Home Retrofit guide. My local resource conservation district here in Lake Tahoe, the Tahoe RCD got a CAL FIRE grant to put together this this brochure on how to retrofit your home for wildfire. And we had a really great committee, including UC folks, and they had budget for nice graphics, and I learned a lot. So that's what I'm gonna be using here. It's actually published by the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, but it's online and peer reviewed and easy to hand out. We did originally also think that we would be able to share it out with other groups. I don't know if you're aware of the Living with Fire program in Nevada, but they have a series of resources, and they've been customized throughout the Sierra by other folks. So we're hoping that this will soon be able to be kind of open source. And if you have a picture that fits better in your area, then you can use it and change the pictures. And that's a picture of Lake Tahoe. And originally we called it the Tahoe Home Retrofit Guide, but then we realized it really is quite a bit broader, so there's no need to do that. And I live in South Lake Tahoe. I've been here for 15 years. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move forward a little bit, just with this framing concept of the idea of the fire adapted community. So a fire adapted community is one that has reduced risks and can survive wildfire with little or no assistance from firefighters. So that's the dream and the goal. And one of those reasons is that generally in a big wildfire, a lot of the home loss happens right at the beginning. I live here in Tahoe. I was here in 2007 during the Angora fire. We lost 250 homes. It was in the first 4 hours. And so we have a great system of mutual aid throughout the state. Firefighters rushed in, but most of the danger is right there at that first expansion point. And so there weren't firefighters in place. We ended up with 2,500 firefighters on it eventually, but that was after all the homes had been lost. So being able to withstand the fire on its own is really important because most people won't have firefighting capacity around their homes, especially not at the beginning of a big fire incident. And so this is the Tahoe kind of way to remember things, and it helps me very much, which is why I start with it. So A, B, C, D, E, that's how I can remember it. Access, having access in and out of neighborhoods. The built environment, B, community fuel breaks. I think about those things a lot as a forester. Defensible space, and E for evacuation. So all of those are part of being ready and adapted to a wildfire. But what I'm going to talk about is B and D, the built environment. And so the idea is, let me go back to this phrase here, the coupled approach to home survival. And in the past, we've had a big focus on defensible space, which is important, and we have laws around that. We don't have as much going on with the built environment, but what we're really starting to understand is that those things need to be coupled together. How you have your house and its flammability and ember contact, as well as the defensible space and where those things are together, because that's how homes get lost. So that said, homes are generally lost through a number of different mechanisms, and the majority, maybe 90% in a lot of fires, are lost through being ignited by embers. So I think a lot of people have this concept that a big wall of flame comes through, and that does happen from time to time, but oftentimes in the wildland, bushes, trees are going off, other homes are going off and burning, and those embers are brought by high winds towards your house. And so what that picture is of embers getting into a gutter and catching the gutter material on fire. There's a broom there on the porch, and the broom is flammable, and the broom is catching on fire. So those embers are going everywhere, and especially you know, things within 5 feet of your house are kind of ember traps that then can have direct contact with the home. So embers are one mechanism. Radiant heat is another, and that's most likely if your homes are close together. And that's why it's important to work with neighbors or really understand where your risk is. But you've certainly seen in some of our more modern conflagrations that you have entire neighborhoods that go up, and oftentimes, you know, one house starts and then starts the house next to them because of that radiant heat exposure. And here's the idea of flame contact, and that does happen, but generally it's not because the flaming front of a fire has come and caught the house. It's because of that vegetation near the home catching on fire, and then the flame contact with the house. And so having the built environment and defensible space working together is really important. In Tahoe, we've had this recommendation for a 5 feet non-combustible zone for the last 20 years. I understand it was recently translated into state law. I don't know anything really about the specifics of any of that, but the materials that I use have been recommending it here locally. We may have been the area that really pioneered this concept. And part of that is because here in Tahoe, we have requirements for water infiltration to reduce sediment to Lake Tahoe. And because of that, we've always had to have 5 foot zone with gravel around the home so that water can infiltrate. And during the Angora fire, it became very obvious that that saved a lot of homes from burning down. So what this is a picture of is a demonstration done by IBHS. That's the Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety. They're in South Carolina. One of our extension advisors retired and was their lead scientist, Steve Quarles. If you've ever heard him speak, he's amazing. He's retired there now, and now he's back here with us. And so he's able to hang out with us. But they built a home, and then they throw embers at it, and they identify whether or not that, you know, these different factors cause the house to burn down. I want to show you a quick video I don't know if this will work this way. Oh, look at that. I'm so impressed. Okay. And we'll have some bigger ones, but here's, there really isn't any sound there, so. Okay, so that's a real short one. I'm gonna come back and show you a longer version of that so you can see, but you may have noticed there was vegetation around the home and then non-combustible siding. And these same embers are being generated by a machine called the Dragon to both sides of the house. And you can see that just the exterior of the home and that near home environment within the first 5 feet made a huge difference on which parts actually caught on fire. So the idea is to have your home be ember prepared. Reducing ember vulnerability is the main way that you can keep your house from igniting. So let's see. Oh, good, look at that. Everything works, it's amazing. So here's the longer version, and it'll show you a lot more detail on that. It's about 4 minutes.
Hmm.
Okay, well, what do you guys think? Did that surprise you? I'd be happy to take any questions or comments about what that looks like.
I
No,
was
go
surprised.
go ahead, Barbara.
I was definitely surprised to see that. So the house had plants right against the house. So that was, I remember one had a plant in it burst.
Plants and mulch.
But the
Sorry,
mulch,
I accidentally let my video keep moving. Okay, now I shut him off. He was talking while you were talking. Go ahead.
no problem. So
You
the plant
kept going.
along with the mulch, that caught on fire too. Ooh, I gotta move that. So what should I put? My garden's right back against the house, right, Lisa? So
Yeah,
now, is that okay to be there?
it seemed far enough away from when I was there.
It's still the same place, but now it makes me wonder. I was gonna plant some plants out front. Now with that video, and we need the 500-foot clearance. It makes
5
me
foot,
wonder.
5 foot.
5
yeah.
foot,
5
just
foot,
5 feet.
5 feet clearance. It makes me wonder, what can I plant that won't help? I want to keep my house, obviously.
So you want to be able to plant something in that 5 foot zone is what you're saying, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I'm trying to get those words out. Right.
That's okay.
Yeah, we
That's
are
good.
used to that idea, but we definitely recommend against doing that sort of thing anymore. I have some pictures of the different kinds of things that you might want to put within 5 feet. So yeah, let me keep going and hopefully we'll get to some of that. Anyway, so let's go ahead and look at, these are drawings
Yeah, I have a
from,
quick question.
yeah.
Says I had thought 1/8 attic screen was okay.
Yeah, I do have that coming up later. 1/8 is what most people end up with. 1/4 is probably too big, and 1/16 is more effective for wildfire embers, but often gets clogged and so needs more maintenance.
Oh, because the
it's still air.
clogging could be flammable.
That's right. The debris could catch on the outside, and then you also don't have any airflow.
And then should we use gravel for the 5 feet? Is another question.
Gravel is definitely effective. So this is a picture from the new guide. And what we decided when we were working with the graphic artist was that we wanted a picture where somebody did everything right. Okay, so no bad practices. So this is what we would consider doable. And you can see there is a 5 foot gravel around. This is a Tahoe house. We use that a lot. I have some pictures of other types of things you might be able to use. But let me go ahead and show you some of these specifics. So I'm going to go through each component separately. And these are, if you don't want to take notes, I can send you the link to the actual guide. This is all from the guide. So obviously the roof is the biggest part of your house, and the roof is considered the most vulnerable, especially if you have a shake or shingle roof. If you have a new house, you have to build a Class A roof, which means it's basically meets a standard that it does not ignite quickly. There are other parts besides just the rating of the roof that are important, however. So some houses, roofs will have these openings here at the end that you can put in. Things are called bird stops, or you could add mineral wool, because birds can get in there and build nests and other creatures. And so that is ember intrusion into your roof, right? Some people will have some kind of a lesser rated roof, but it will be considered Class A by assembly, which means they've added an additional fire resistant layer like gypsum wallboard or something like that, that actually makes it Class A. So you can't always tell just by looking at the material. It might be Class A if these additional components are added. So clearly the roof would be the #1 thing to think about. Obviously that's an expensive item. So you could, like I said, do some of this maintenance. Obviously the vegetation, we saw in that video, the roof did not burn through on the, because it was a Class A roof. However, there are points of vulnerability on most houses. So right here is a dormer. And so you actually have siding right here in the middle of your roof. And so it's important to take all that vegetation debris out, and especially here, because that's your point of vulnerability. So if you had something like that, you could potentially just replace this vulnerable siding right in this area. That's one thing to do. You can use some metal flashing that extends up into the siding. So do you see that here? This tiny little line here is 6-inch metal flashing. So if a fire or debris starts here, it doesn't catch the siding on fire. So there are a number of ways to reduce that kind of risk. The other part of the roof here is the skylight. And there's basically two kinds. These domed ones are usually plastic. The flat ones are generally made out of glass. And so obviously you don't want to have all this debris on your skylight because it's glass, it could break. And obviously the plastic ones could melt. And so if it can open, you obviously want to close it. You could also add a 16th-inch metal mesh there to reduce ember intrusion in case your skylight is open while you're gone. Okay. How do you, oh, okay. So you're still, I'm looking at the chat and not quite ready for those questions yet. So I'm gonna move on unless somebody has a question about roofs or skylights. Okay. All right.
You saw those questions and you want to wait to answer them.
Yeah, those were about gravel and right.
And somebody said, how do you keep the gravel clear of leaves? A blower.
That's a good answer.
I have a question about roofs. What about tile roofs? They're full of holes,
Yeah, they're
openings.
non-combustible, but do you mean the openings at the end?
No, well, you can look up and see the sky from underneath them. The way they're constructed. They're not close to the outside, really.
Huh. Well, I know the tile itself is non-combustible, but if it has a lot of openings, then you might be able to do some maintenance on it with caulk or something like that. That would reduce.
No, it's just the way they're made. It's not a defect or anything.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I don't really know the answer. I have never had a tile roof. I always assumed they were pretty tight by design.
Anything can walk right in, like animals, you know.
And you're sure
There's nothing to keep them out.
on the front? You're sure they're not coming in
The way they lap. The way they lap.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Let me find out if there's any kind of maintenance or something that could be done for that. I have the fellow who helped us write this guide. I'm sure he would know the answer to that, and I don't. So maybe Debbie, you can help me help remind me. I'll send him an email and see if he has any upgrade suggestions.
Thank
I'll
you.
do that, Susie. I'll email you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to rain gutters, and we just saw this in the video, so that's a clip from the video, right? So rain gutters then are covering up the side of the roof, and the side of the roof that's often combustible, right? It's a sheathing or a fascia board. So it is also flammable. One of the things you can do to make sure that you're not catching that bit on fire from under the roof, right? You could have a Class A roof, but you could catch it on fire from its wooden side because it's only the top which is non-combustible. So obviously taking your stuff out of the gutters. This is a drawing of a metal drip edge gutter cover that you can use. I know that these also require maintenance. Does anybody have one of these, and what have they found? Yeah, go ahead. Eileen, I think you're on mute. Eileen, we can't hear you. You're talking, but you're on mute.
I guess maybe she can't hear you.
She sees me. She's trying to unmute herself now. Well, maybe you could just type a little something in the chat box if you can't figure it out. That would be fun too. Just give us your impressions on those rain gutter covers. Okay, moving on to vents. So that's what y'all were asking about already. Up here in the picture, here are some foundation vents. Here's the attic vent on the gable end. And obviously you just saw the video where the embers can go in through the vents. So if you can cover them with a metal mesh screen, that's better. Obviously the plastic ones can melt. In general, you're probably still going to have some kind of embers going in there if you have a vent. So avoiding storing combustible items near the attic or crawl space could help. I know this is quite, this is a ridiculous recommendation for me, because that's the only place I have to put all my junk. But I have tried not to put all those things in the flow of where embers would come in. Make sure your vents are in good condition, not having any tears or openings, and consider replacing them with these newer flame resistant options. So these are new types of vents that cost more, but they are supposed to keep embers out. So I actually did this on my house about 3 or 4 years ago. I bought Vulcan vents. That's this one here. And they have mechanisms by which the embers aren't supposed to intrude. Some of these things have an intumescent coating where they swell up with heat. And I think each vent was actually like $250. But I only had 3 or 4 of them. And for me, it seemed like a good investment. If you can't do that, actually having a cover, you've seen people maybe just put plywood over their vents. And that's very effective if you have time before you have to evacuate. But probably you wouldn't want those on all the time because you need your airflow so you don't get dry rot and things like that. And then screening. So here you go. The small screens let less things through, and what it lets through are smaller and they extinguish more quickly. So they are effective, although they can clog easily and the stuff on the outside can become a source of embers. That mid-sized screen is more common because it still lets in fewer embers, but they don't clog as easily. And the 1/4-inch ones are considered, looks like I made some typos there, too large. And so if you have a 1/4-inch screen, you could cover it up with another one. That would be helpful.
So we have a question about my gutter covers are not metal, so maybe they could melt, but debris does not accumulate behind them.
Great. Yeah.
Is that about right? Okay.
That's good to know. Yeah, obviously, I mean, we can't be 100% risk-free, and it's up to you as an individual to figure out, you know, where do you want to reduce your risk? You can't probably afford to do it everywhere. And so you want to use your money and your time on the most effective things. Eileen, I see you're off of mute now. Did you want to say about your cover?
I have gutter helmet and they're metal or aluminum, and they come maybe once, I'll call them once every 2 or 3 years. They'll come and clean out the gutters to make sure that everything's flowing good. But yeah, I'm glad I have them because then I don't have to worry so much. But then I also have my roof cleared a couple times during the year. So it's pretty, you know, you just maintain your roof.
Great. I'm having this problem again, Debbie, where I'm pushing move forward and nothing is happening. This has happened to me in the past.
Has it? It's happened to me too, Susie. And what you can try, what I find works for me, I don't know if it's the right way, is I don't actually do the slideshow. I'll do what's called the normal view, where all the slides are on the, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's
And
happening. Exactly. Okay, that's as close as I can get. All right.
Perfect.
It's usually when my internet power is low. Okay, let's see. Can I move around? There we go. All right, so windows, I was going to talk about next. So windows are generally most vulnerable to radiant heat because the heat comes, here's the radiant heat exposure. It's not usually the frames, but usually this expansion that will lead to this crack in this outer window. And we definitely saw that after the Angora fire. I got to go in and look at the homes, and there were quite a few who only had one pane left because there had been some kind of heat source, a shrub or something that burned right next to it, but the one window held. And so you have a much better chance of one of your panes holding if one of them is tempered. And so when you build a brand new house in a fire hazard area, you are required to have all your downstairs windows have one pane that's tempered, because it's less likely that that glass will break and allow flames to get into the house. So if you're replacing your windows, we just did that too. My husband's in the middle of changing out all the siding. And I sent him to the glass store to get one with a tempered window. And the guy with the glass said, "Oh, you don't have to do that here. It's not the law that you have to do that. You don't need that." And sent him home with something else. And I said, "No, take that back. I want one with a tempered pane." And this guy just thought he was saving us money. And I don't quite understand it, how that happened. So there's a real educational need, but now it's only the one wall that I have that's right next to my neighbor. I'm in a neighborhood. The other neighbor is much farther away, but we're working on the one that's right next to my neighbor, maybe 10, 15 feet. And that one we went ahead and put the tempered glass in. Let's see, installing screens on your windows can also help, and it also can reduce the heat exposure. And obviously if you're leaving, make sure you close your windows.
Yeah.
Okay, so eaves. Eaves is this under part of the roof as it sticks out from the side of your house.
Mhm.
So eaves can provide a point of entry for flames. If, say, there's a shrub right there underneath that's burning, you can see, or a tree, it's vulnerable to flame contact. Also has these kind of blocked vents in here. Those are vulnerable to embers. We have a lot of these in Tahoe houses. A lot of my neighbors have these, what do they call them? Bird nest vents.
Mhm.
So heat builds up in here between these rafters, and then the vents are vulnerable. So you can inspect these areas for gaps where embers could lodge or pass through, screen your vents, and fill the gaps with caulk. You could also enclose your eaves, and this is called a soffitted eave, and it still has a vent here, right? That's right here. So you don't get rid of your vent. This is just a metal vent that works a little differently. So we actually did this as well around our house. Exterior walls. And I think a lot of people think of just the walls when they're thinking about things. And it's definitely true that walls are vulnerable, and non-combustible siding is definitely an advantage, especially if you're very close to another home. But other ways to deal with this issue are this 5-foot non-combustible zone here. You saw that pretty clearly, I think, in the video. In this, we have gravel, that's the Tahoe thing. But if you had a shrub here, you could see that if it caught on fire, it might catch your combustible siding. So if you have combustible siding, having that 5-foot zone is even more important. Also, the recommendation now is to start the siding 6 inches above from the ground, so that the siding is not touching the ground, and you have this non-combustible, maybe that's concrete, whatever your foundation looks like. Siding itself can have flame go through the joints here. That's what you're seeing from the back. And so if you have lots of open space, you can use caulk. You definitely want to remove all this debris. And then if you're having a new house built, you saw that complex corner that caught on fire more. You saw that caught on fire. So you wouldn't want like lots of opening corners there like that. And then in new areas, you'll be required to use some fire resistant layers in wall assembly. So they're definitely not saying not to use combustible siding. There are these additional mitigations you could put in if you have them. And then decks. So obviously decks can be an issue. You could get flames under the deck, or you could get embers landing on your deck. So to deal with flames under your deck, you obviously want to have something ember resistant, non-combustible under your deck. And you see in this picture, that's the 5-foot non-combustible zone. It goes all the way around the deck as well as the house and all the outbuildings. So there's nothing combustible under there that could allow a flame to burn up from underneath. If you're on a slope, you obviously have to work on your defensible space, down slope, your D space. Don't store flammable things under there, and you could use steel joists. That'd be one mitigation. The other way that decks can burn down your house is by embers landing on your deck. And so regularly keeping your deck clear of debris. You can apply a metal flashing. And so that's what this little technical drawing is of. It's got this minimum 6 inches of this foil flashing and this metal non-combustible final board, so that if your deck catches on fire, it doesn't transfer and catch your house on fire. You could also increase the gap between your deck boards so that debris can fall through. Instead of my old nasty junky old deck is really tight and it gets stuck with stuff in between. If you have the boards farther apart, then they can go through and they won't be a place for an ember to stick. You could also just replace this board closest to your house with something non-combustible. And then obviously, if you are leaving for a fire, don't leave your combustible things on your porch. Take your furniture away, put your cushions in the house so that embers landing on your deck don't catch your deck on fire. And then without fire suppression, your deck catches your house on fire. I am personally hoping to tear off my deck and put on a patio. That's on our list of upgrades. We're not there yet, but it's in the next couple of years. Because mine is old and falling apart. It's not really something I would want to fix.
Just curious, Susie, what kind of patio? Is it going to be rock or concrete or?
Yeah, my husband is like the collector guy who's always collecting materials from the neighbors who are getting rid of them. So I think it's those locking tile. They're not tile. They look like bricks, but they're thicker and they have like little shapes.
Oh, nice. Right.
They're still called
Nice.
pavers, I think.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Pavers.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, I hope so. Okay, and then fences. So we did see fences in the Angora fire that burned all the way around the home. And some fences I think could have burned some houses down. I know that's hard to believe, but wood fences are quite flammable. Could leave flame right to your siding, which then in the absence of a firefighter would catch your siding on fire and then up it goes. So the standard is to replace that part of your fence that touches your house with something non-combustible, metal or chain link or whatever it is, at least 5 feet. And then you want to remove debris from it regularly. And I know that having a trellis is a lovely thing, but having a wood trellis on your fence or growing things up your fence means that if you have a wooden fence, that plant debris could catch underneath and embers then could start your fence on fire. You know, if you have this non-combustible bit at the end, it hopefully won't catch your house on fire, but your fence would be vulnerable. So here's just some pictures of the wooden fence, and here's an upgrade of a wooden fence now with a metal gate. Garages. And here you go. You can see this garage is being treated just like the home. It has a 5-foot non-combustible zone around it. So you want to make sure you treat it the same way. You want to make sure that you have no cracks between your door and the framing so that embers won't get in while you're not there. Any other components like your windows and vents should be treated the same way. Obviously, we've learned that you should add a battery backup so you can close or open the door without power. And then make sure you close it if you're evacuating. Let's see. There we go. Okay. And then the chimney. So some people will have chimneys that are wooden. Mine's made out of like ugly old pink brick, lucky me. But if you have something wooden, you see this area here where there's a roof and there's a wooden part there, so debris can catch, and a metal strip or flashing there can help reduce vulnerability to embers. And then obviously closing it up and during the fire season is good, and then covering it with obviously a screen. So not only do you have ember vulnerabilities, but you have embers, so that can be a real danger spot. Okay, so I went through a lot of stuff. Does anybody have questions about the home? Because I would like to move on to this 5-foot space.
Don't see any questions.
Okay, great. So here's back to my original drawing. Here's that 5-foot space here, this non-combustible zone. It's now being called zone 0. That annoys me. I don't think we need 0, 1, or 2, or 1, 2, or 3. I would just like to call it the non-combustible zone, but we work with CAL FIRE, and now this is the language. This is zone 0 within this 5-foot zone. This 5 to 30 is this lean, clean, and green zone where you have a landscape, but you want to make sure it's well maintained. And then this 30 to 100 feet is the reduced fuel zone. So that is the law that you by law have to maintain 100 feet of defensible space around your home. And I believe that this 5-foot component is now also the law, but it has been recently passed. Okay, so it's done to reduce vulnerability to embers. And I thought that video showed it extremely well. So you should include all these areas around the deck. We don't recommend plants or mulching. You can use some kind of hardscaping. So in Tahoe, this is called gravel best management practice. Concrete, brick walkways. Obviously you don't want flammable items there. These are some Tahoe houses. So here you have this walkway around the house that separates the vegetation from the house. Here's one from El Dorado County Gardeners. This is a hardscaping, like a beautiful path near the house. You can see they still have a few plants. If you have to have plants, then you'd really want very low maintenance, low risk plants. This is pretty common in Tahoe because of soil erosion reasons. We have lots of that underneath decks. And then this is a picture from my Nevada colleagues of a fire in Gardnerville in 2016. This was a guy in this upstairs apartment who threw a cigarette out his window. It landed in this ornamental juniper and caught it on fire and burned right up the siding, right? So this is such a common concept that we need these little shrubs next to our doors, but you know what? We really don't need shrubs next to our doors. This idea came with us from the Midwest, and would discourage anybody from having shrubbery next to their doors and windows, and especially this plant, this ornamental juniper.
That's hard to paint. You're not supposed to have vegetation right up to your dwelling if it should be a space that makes it easier for painting as well.
Yeah, but this was what my house looked like
Oh,
back in
no, I know, but just.
Iowa in the Midwest. We seem to have these shrubs everywhere. I don't know why.
So I have, under my front deck, I have a large area. Should I put down fabric liner and then gravel?
We actually are working on a proposal right now to do some experimentation at one of our research stations to be able to identify like how much gravel, how much liner, how would it work, and that thing. But yes, we definitely would recommend that. But how much gravel, how deep, I can't really tell you. But
Okay.
whatever keeps the weeds down would be good.
So Sylvia, can you ask that question? Because I don't know what that word is. Sylvia says that what's the best material for,
To make
Soffits,
soffits, yeah.
I don't know what that is.
that's when you box in the eaves.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I think they're generally made out of wood. Ours were boards, I think plywood, T111, that sort of thing. Generally, you want it to look nice so it can, continues the lines of your house.
So she wanted to know what's the best material to use. You think
She said
wood
generally
doesn't-
wood.
Okay.
I looked online some time ago and there was 3 different materials, so I didn't know which was best.
Oh, okay.
What have you seen? Like-
There was metal, wood, and then some cement mix. It's like Trex,
Ah,
whatever that stuff is, it has cement in it.
Yeah, well, obviously you have to weigh risks. We used the same wood siding as we put on our house to put in our soffit eaves, but I'm sure using something non-combustible would have reduced risk. So,
Thanks.
yeah, I'm sure that's better in our case, so.
Okay, that was all.
Okay. The lean, clean, and green zone, I think this is something you probably already know. I guess I would just emphasize here that mulch is a great tool for growing nice plants. You just don't want to have it everywhere, and you don't want to have it leading up to your house. So we're not saying no mulch, but we're saying consider it like in islands so that it wouldn't be continuous to your fence or something like that. So it couldn't generate embers, catch on fire, and then catch something else up on fire. So just think carefully about the arrangement of your mulch. And then what I use compost. Get a couple loads of horse manure every year and compost it over the winter. And that's what I use for mulch. Things like gorilla hair are quite flammable, pine needles, things like that, obviously. So you just really want to be careful with that. And then you guys are done at 7, aren't you, Debbie?
Yes.
So I need to make sure to wrap up. Okay, good. And then not just 5 feet, but think about where you're putting plants, right? Are you putting them right under the vents and eaves, right next to your siding or under your deck or in those inside corners that are more flammable? Think about not putting them in those more vulnerable areas and putting them a little farther away so that you have a safer landscape. Fire-resistant plant lists. This picture is of cactuses burning, right? And the point there is that there really aren't any that are non-flammable. There are some that are worse than others. I particularly hate ornamental junipers, but really, where you put them, pruning and irrigating, low resin, less likely to be ignited. You can have shrubs, just don't put them right next to your house and don't have them across your entire landscape, just in nice little ornamental areas. Oh, I think I already said all this. So I have some cool video, but I don't think we have time for it. But anyway, bark mulch, here it is catching on fire. Here's a picture from the Tubbs fire of the mulch that caught on fire in somebody's yard. So mulch really does catch on fire.
Okay, so it says we should cut back any trees that are close to our house or that can fall.
No, not necessarily. People generally look right at the trees right away. And generally a large tree is pretty well adapted. You'll see a lot of dead trees around houses that burn down, but oftentimes it's the houses that burn the trees down. And that's what we saw here in the Angora fire. All the houses, all the trees go through the Angora fire area, and where there's living trees, it's where there wasn't a house to burn them down. So I would say it's really important to think about all the other things, the shrubs, the small little details, the things under your porch, the pine needles, all those things. This is the reduced fire zone, the 30 to 100. They're not saying get rid of all the trees, but generally people go right to the big tree, and that's not the biggest risk, especially if it's lit correctly, because our trees are fire adapted, and those big old ponderosa pines have very, very thick bark. So they're not necessarily going to burn your house down. Small trees with their canopies under your second story roof, yes, that's bad. You wouldn't want it within 5 feet of your house. So these are my recommendations. Call your local fire station, get a defensible space inspection, do whatever you can, and then figure out what to grow. Anyway, here's what I was trying to say. Focus on removing the highest risk elements first. Your wooden roof is much higher of a risk than a big old growth tree. These are pines with a little prescribed fire underneath, and they've been handling small fires for a really long time. So large fire tolerant trees are probably not the issue. All those other things are. So I just have a few pictures. I'll try and wrap up here. Anyway, yeah, so this is down the street from me. In this case, it's a ton of little lodgepole pines. And I would say, yes, trees here are the biggest risk. This is a private lot. No one's ever done anything to. I think we have a new vegetation management ordinance where these people are going to have this lot thinned, and they're going to be billed because of the new law that's been passed. But anyway, if I were in that house, I think I'd be sneaking over in the middle of the night and thinning out those trees. Because yes, those trees look like the risk to me.
Yes, we have a lot up here in Twain Harte, our properties that are densely forested, and people who live here year round are concerned that the people that own the properties, they live who knows where. But yeah.
Yeah, El Dorado County passed this ordinance maybe last year. I don't personally know of how well that's going. I haven't seen it implemented in my neighborhood. Here is another picture. Okay, this is also down the street from my office. Here's a house. And if you said, you know, where's the risk here? This has
everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere, right? So it's got a shake roof, and it's got all these shrubs right underneath these trees. Should they cut the trees down? Well, if it were me, I would work on the shrubs. And then if I had the money, I would replace the roof, right?
Yeah.
Some aspen trees, those are probably pretty low risk. But the first thing I would do is take out these horrible shrubs. And that wouldn't cost that much, and that would reduce the risk.
There's a request for the link to review it. I'm assuming she means your PowerPoint.
Sure, I'm happy to share it. Here's one more picture with a roof, and there's trees right above it. So thinning up the tree, limbing up the tree and changing the roof is probably where the thing. Here's some lovely trees. I don't think these are the risk. I think it's the shake roof. And here, this is also down the street from me. This looks pretty good. I think there's some opportunity for embers to go under the porch, but overall, it doesn't look bad to me. So I'm just trying to encourage you to think about the house and the veg together. This, since I'm out of time, and this is a talk I give to people to say, hey, talk to our master gardeners. because I think there is a role that you all can play in wildfire hazard reduction. I can tell you what not to do, but people want to know what they could plant that would look nice. And so I think it's really important for you all to apply your expertise and help people out figuring that out. These are the Master Gardeners in Lake Tahoe. And here they are doing a wildfire awareness event, and they've put out a 5-foot and 30-foot zone, and they've made recommendations in for the Tahoe Basin for what things to put where. So that worked really well. Here's a few publications. Home Landscaping for Fire. We have this home survival in wildfire prone areas, lots of detail. This is the new Wildfire Retrofit Guide, and we have a whole pub on combustibility of different landscape mulches. And then we have a couple of really great different websites you can go to if you're interested. IIBHS, the Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety, has a whole lot of really great fact sheets about each component of your home with tons of detail that I don't know the answers to myself. So I definitely recommend those as well. Okay, sorry for going over.
No, this was great. I mean, talk about timely information, great information. It, you know, I'm thinking again, all the things that I'd like to change in my house. So I really appreciate it. Does anybody have any last minute questions?
I'm wondering about the propane tank. Should I put more gravel around it?
Yeah, you-
Probably.
That is something that you have 5 feet non-combustible around.
So gravel is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question, by the way. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody, and we will send you the link to this recording, and you'll be able to see all these resources. I will ask that question of Susie about the terracotta roof. And then of course, you could also email her, but thank you, Susie. This is so timely. I can't believe that it's the beginning of May, and this is a subject that we have to think about right now. Great presentation, and really appreciate it. So, and I'm going to close out the meeting. Is that okay, Lisa?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 I don't want to see.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, fine.